Om. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahe Tejasvinavaditamastu ma Vidvishavahe. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Okay, so the topic finally, the last couple of verses today, the final topic of chapter 9. Dedicated efforts lead the seeker, even the unrighteous, to self-realization. So even if you're the worst of the worst, what matters, so irrespective of your spiritual status, what matters is what direction you're taking. The self in all of us is the same, samaha. There's no difference, whether it be in a wicked person or whether it be in somebody who feels they're righteous. It's the same. So one has to develop a dispassionate passion to see divinity in the diversity that helps you along your spiritual well-being. So it was mentioning, we were talking about it last week, who were the persons who were considered a sinful birth, and what we surmised is that those who have agitated minds have a tendency to have desires which are not resolved. Those are considered sinful. That's it. So what it means is those who have not evolved their status from maybe more tamasic, rajasic. But if you evolve your status from rajas to sattva, it doesn't matter who you are. And remember, I think we mentioned Valmiki was the author of the Ramayana. He was a highway robber. So anybody can evolve themselves to get to the self, but you have to put in the commensurate effort required to get there. So everybody is looking for the same thing, maybe in different avenues or different pursuits. The thing to remember is when you look at it in the world, when you look for your fulfillment in the world, you are simply, at best, acquiring to enjoy, getting rid of the sorrow that's causing you an issue, and hoping to enjoy what you've acquired. That's the long and short of it, until you pitch up on something bigger within yourself, and you start with questioning, and you start with allowing that conscience to prick and your intellect to start making discrimination between this and that, and essentially what's real and unreal. But you start with your higher and lower values, which you understand more easily. And then as you look through this type of knowledge, it becomes more, you can take on more complex values to actually see the whole picture, you know. So it's not simplistic, it's very it's complex if you don't put in the effort. In fact, if you put in the effort, it all becomes simplified. You know what you've got to do. You just have to get on to doing it. The problem is we don't get on to doing it, so it all looks complicated. So sinful birth just means an agitated mind. And as it was pointed out, it was a Shudra, Vaishya, and it also mentioned woman. Symbolic. Because today in society, it is not the women who are complacent. It is the men, unfortunately. It shouldn't be either or. It should be anybody who wants to get to truth. But that's what is beginning to happen. It's not a pro con. Just so anybody who ups their tamas to rajas to actually utilize and become that sattvic nature is not of those three. So it means the quality, not the embodiment. It's the quality. The feminine quality is not exploratory. The male quality is considered exploratory. In today's society, the women have more of that exploratory nature into the truth. It seems to be that way. It's tipping the balance. Not all the time. So you've got to actually just forget the woman-man thing. Just look at it. Who has an exploratory quality to get to the truth? That's what's important. Who is evolving their sattva? That's what's really important. Forget all the symbolic things. It's for the illiterate, essentially. They get caught up in it. So the kingdom of heaven lies very much within you. Whoever searches that out will get it. So it's the direction you take. Once you're established in yoga, you get to the truth. That's what he's trying to indicate. So he was putting forward in the last verse, you know, it's difficult. If your mind's agitated, it's difficult to calm it, essentially. Now here, in the last couple of verses, he goes on. Let's, is there any question before we move on from here? Everything okay? Let's go.
अनित्यमसुखं लोकम् इमं प्राप्य भजस्व माम्.
Sam, if you could read the verse. Thank you.
Verse 33. How much more than holy Brahmins and devout royal sages, having reached this transient, joyless world, you worship me.
Okay. So, referring last, we were just speaking about the types who are of agitated mind previously. If those can attain the self with the effort, when your mind's agitated, a brahmana, who's a brahmana? Anyone?
In what sense do you mean who's a brahmana?
Who is a brahmana? What's a brahmana?
Well, usually, based on the previous verse, it's someone who's like the most holy or something kind of thing, right? or so
And
their
what,
minds tend to be calmer compared to like the warriors or those who are very much in the world.
so what else? What's the predominant trait in the Brahmana?
You mean sattvic?
Yes. So the Brahmana has not got any birthright to be born a Brahmana, as we often see in society today. People say, I'm a Brahmana. I remember I grew up in this society and people would say, I'm Brahmana. There's nothing Brahman about them. In fact, they were all mostly Vaishyas and Shudras by their activities. So somebody who's refined looks at the interests of others because they have those qualities. They're fulfilled to a degree that they can look at the other's interest to raise the bar for others because they've raised it for themselves. And we were talking in this chapter is royal secret, royal knowledge. So who are the royal sages? What would that refer to? So the Brahmanas and devout royal sages. What's it? It's more or less the same thing. Why is he making that distinction? So we were talking initially royal secret, royal knowledge. Royal indicates that somebody's who's in a position of prosperity, who doesn't have to think about where their next meal is coming from or XYZ. Their material side is looked after. So they can afford to look into, they're not worried about what's coming next. They can afford to look into the higher values because they're not concerned with those values any longer. So they may be Rajasic, there may be Rajasics going on Sattvic. The Brahmana is definitely predominantly Sattvic. So, and devout royal sages, having reached this transient, joyless world. What does it mean by transient, joyless world? Who did their homework and read the verses before they came to class? Did anyone? So you know what? When you come into anything like this, it's a purpose for you to not just read the verses, reflect on it. When you do your morning study, wake up. It's that much taking in knowledge, but it's that much reflection. That's how you're going to digest these values. And then use them, and then evolve in them. So, going back to it, we keep going on, transient, joyless world, meaning this person qualified themselves. They're not chasing the world because there's an understanding that that's transient and it's not going to actually get them what they're after. So it's that person who is exploratory to find out, investigate the truth he's talking about. No man, no woman, just that individual who is prepared to get into it. worships me. Me meaning, what does me mean? We're on 9th chapter. I'm asking you because we've come across these things a few times. Me means what? Mr. Krishna? Me? Does it mean that? What does it mean?
It means the self.
The self. That universal Atman, Brahman, self. God, whatever you want to call it. Whichever language suits. It's not personal. Universal. The self. So, a person who's qualified, he's talking about a person who's qualified, a Brahmana, not male, not female, one who's raised their qualities of purity, purified their mind, doesn't have to think of things materially. They're catered to, real sages. They understand the transient nature of the world and that whatever they run after and chase after will give them a quick fix, but the value of that pleasure would diminish. So they've started to look within themselves by questioning and by enabling their conscience to prick onto something more universal. Those worship me. Irrespective of who you are, man or woman, if you're of exploratory nature, to investigate the truth, you'll get there. You're a Brahmana, a person whose pursuit is just to get to the truth and also has the capacity to look in the interest of the whole. So often the rishis would be in the Raja's kingdom. Rishi means sage, would be in the kingdom, advising the kings and queens on what they needed to do for the interest of the whole of the community. They weren't advising them on finance or politics, but they were advising them on the higher values of spiritual well-being. Raja Rishis, that's where that term comes from. Shall we read? Yes, Tim.
Just that term Raja Rishi,
Mm.
like today, would it may refer to someone who's got, say, a full scholarships to study Vedanta? Would that be a Raja Rishi? They don't have to think about their material possessions, or is it something much higher in terms of wealth?
So a Raja is somebody who's got all the privileges in place of the material. They don't have to think about it. So they don't think about it. Their mind is available to think on the more universal things of life, the more refined things of life, sattvic things, rather than the material of what can I get out of it. They can think on, explore within. So they're put in a more advantageous situation because their mind's calmer, because they don't have to think about the nonsense of the material. They're not thinking about paying their bills. They're thinking about the higher values. So those with agitated mind are thinking about paying their bills. Their hands are tight. They can't let go of their monetary things to even give anywhere where they're taking. Those are the what we were mentioning in the previous words, the persons with agitated minds. But it's not material. It's all internal. You could be a Brahmana with nothing in your pocket. It's your state of mind. You could have nothing in your pocket materially, but you will, if you're serving a higher cause, if you serve and sacrifice, you'll be looked after. So you've got to have a real discipline. It's not passive. It's very assertive in the way you approach life. But here he's saying, if you're a Raja, if you're a real sage, you've got nothing to worry about. You can easily fix your mind on there. If you're a Brahmana, a person who's a spiritual aspirant, not concerned with those things, you have your mind fixed with that. Previous verses saying, if you're a Shudra or a Vaishya, a trader or one who's got more, or he puts forward a woman, very difficult to stomach when you are a woman, but when you understand the context, you understand it does not mean woman as in male and female. It means exploratory, or where you don't explore the bigger truths of life. If you are doing that, female and male quality, if you're employing that male quality of being exploratory, then you'll get to the truth. So if that's the case, male or female is insignificant. It's purely on, are you exploratory? Are you raising your bar of being materialistic to spiritual? If your mind's agitated, it's difficult to do. So saying even those people put in the effort, you'll get to the true spiritual enlightenment. You'll get there, but you've got to put in commensurate effort. Does that make sense? Yep. So let's read verse 34, 33. Sam.
Sure. Verse 33. So, how much more than holy Brahmins and devout royal sages, having reached this transient, joyless world, you worship me. So I'm going to read the commentary now.
Sure.
The preceding 3 verses help strengthen the hope of self-purification among sinners. As a result, even Vaishyas, or traders, and Shudras, or laborers, can aspire for self-realization. The most qualified holy Brahmins and devout Raja Rishis would then find it far easier to realize the self.
Just one point. The whole of the society is generally Vaishyas and Sudras, traders. So even they can get it, it's saying, if they put in the effort. And in today's society, if you look in the city, those who are often quite rajasic, frenzied with activity, are ready to let go of that because they're fed up of it. They're ready to look on something bigger. So it's just putting it forward. But for a Brahmana, it's even easier if you're already endowed with it. Go ahead, sir. Thank you.
Being predominantly sattvika, pure, Brahmins belong to the highest cadre of human being. Their sattvika nature displaces their rajas, passion, and tamas, indolence. A Brahmin's mind is calm and composed, his intellect clear and contemplative. Thereby, a Brahmin qualifies fully for spiritual pursuit and enlightenment. Likewise, the Raja Rishis also qualify for enlightenment. Raja means king, Rishi means sages. So Raja Rishis are royal sages, kings who lead saintly lives. With the passage of time, this class of persons has become more a legendary concept than a reality. So bringing this concept to the present era, a Raja Rishi may compare with a prosperous person having spiritual inclination. Seldom do both prosperity and spirituality reside in a single person. Prosperity keeps you materially fulfilled. Spirituality renders your mind calm and your intellect clear. These qualities are ideally suited for spiritual advancement.
So whoever you are, you've got to put in the effort. But you have certain advantages if things are taken care of. You can concentrate on the higher values, not distracted. Hence why we have places like the Academy in India. It keeps you away from all the distractions. You've just got a beautiful schedule from the morning. Wake up early, study, do your reflection, yoga, sports, breakfast, first class, karma, some work on the canvas of your inclination, lunch, siesta, because you've been up since 4. Afternoon tea, there's lots of work going on the canvas. Evening, a discussion. You've got to always be able to question and discuss these sorts of values, to reflect, digest. Somebody has a better point of view than you. Helps you grow. A little bit of devotion. In the evening, there might be classical music or some bhajans or various things go on. Dinner. And then perhaps if you want to walk or do whatever, then sleep. Next day comes. Everything's designed and streamlined for you to be very comfortable and just keep your mind on the higher values. So if you can do that in your everyday here, you get that opportunity. If you can't put yourself into a place, an environment with like-minded people, elevate your intellect, sharpen yourself up. So when you're in the world, you can really tackle it with a better interest than only your self-interest, something more universal. So traditionally, this knowledge was taught to, does anybody know what age group this knowledge was taught to? I don't know your name. What age? Yes. I think, are you on mute?
40, at the age of 40.
So, in Plato's Republic, they say that you can learn philosophy at the age of 50. That's a bit late. In the old traditional Upanishadic method, this knowledge was taught to children as early as 6. So by the time you'd be about 16, thank you. By the time you'd, Donna, thank you. By the time you would be 16, you would be fortified to actually meet the challenges of the world and look at everybody's interest and evolve spiritually. That was the idea. But now people are so frightened to take up this knowledge because their basic needs are not met, their minds are agitated, and mostly their parents have not educated themselves in bigger values. So they're too frightened to let their kids go into this sort of knowledge, not realizing it actually fortifies you to meet the challenges and actually enjoy life. Because as it was saying in the verse, what does it say? Having reached the transient, joyless world, you worship me. There's a comprehension that everything in the world is transient. So it can only give you a quick fix. Once you've understood that, you want to look for something which is a little bit more permanent in terms of your happiness. Transient won't wash it, do it any longer. So it's important to pitch up on these values. And he's saying here it's easier for this level of person more than the previous verse. The persons have got an agitated mind. Let's read a little bit more. Thanks.
People stray away from their spiritual center and lose themselves in the maze of worldly perceptions, emotions, and thoughts. Krishna advises mankind to seek him, Atman, Brahman, the Supreme Self. The verse presents two powerful reasons to change your focus from the external world to the self within. First, this world is joyless, asukam.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it provides any joy, it is transient, anityam. Joyless because worldly pleasures have a diminishing value, reducing to zero. Second, the actual enjoyment in sense contacts is subjective, not objective. The mind feels the fulfillment, contentment, joy. This joy arising from worldly contacts never sustains itself. It passes away. It is transient.
So, anybody in their right minds, why would we keep chasing it? So you've got to be in your right mind. Tim.
As we use the word joy in the English language, it is by its nature transient. A joy is something which passes.
There's no problem with it. Enjoy it. Enjoy everything that comes. But what's the issue with it? What's the issue with living in terms of wanting your happiness out of the world? What's the issue with that transient value? Guru.
Well, we probably get attached to them. I think the issue is with the attachment.
So you get attached. So what happens often is, remember, joy comes, another joy comes, another joy comes, and then the sorrow, 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 and then one joy comes. And one joy comes, and then there's sorrow, 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 sorrow for a long time, and then one slight joy comes. And the issue becomes is that we're hanging on to the past, hoping that there's still some pleasure there, instead of moving on it. People stay in situations where there's no pleasure, no happiness, no joy. They're totally neutralized. They don't put any effort to get out of it. So they put in actual fact, they put in a lot of effort, but there's no, not intelligently, but there's no joy. So people stay in relationships where there's no intelligent joy going on, but they're so attached to the object or being that they can't leave them or leave it. They're enslaved by it, in fact. So the whole of life goes by that way. You don't grow, it becomes stagnant. So joy, as you said, yes, is transient. And as long as we can understand that it's transient, there's no taboo in enjoying everything in the world. The problem is if you get attached to it, you consume your mind on that object or being, and you don't get on with the rest of it. So it steals away life, and that true happiness consumes it. For one thing you thought was joyful, it's gone. You're still holding on and reliving it as though it's still there. Time loops all. So certainly if you are smart, you'll understand joy is transient. You don't get stuck there. Let's go. 34. Does anybody have any question before we move on? Okay. 34.
मन्मना भव मद्भक्तः मद्याजी मां नमस्कुरु मामे वैश्यसि युक्तैवम् आत्मानं मत्परायणः.
Guru, if you could read the verse, that'd be great. Thank you.
Verse 34. Fix your mind on me, be devoted to me, sacrifice to me, bow down to me, thus uniting yourself to me, taking me as the supreme goal, you shall come to me.
Okay. So this is the concluding verse of chapter 9 of the Royal Secret, Royal Knowledge, Royal Secret. So he's giving a conclusion, a direction to the seeker to reach self-realization. So fix the mind in me, manmana. Discipline your mind, that's what it's saying, with your intellect. Your mind is that monkey which wanders here and here, up and down. It's got no direction, it's impulsive, it's emotional. There's nothing wrong with emotions. Emotions make a person human. But what's wrong with it is when they go helter-skelter. So your intellect is that faculty in you of reason, rationale, that can judge, can make distinctions between what's higher, lower, more universal. So fix the mind in me. Me meaning not personal, me meaning the self. To a devotional person, pronouns are used so that it helps them attach themselves to something they feel is to do with them. But it's meaning that universal self, that Atman, Brahman, truth. Call it what you want, Godhead. So discipline your mind towards that universal truth. You've got to use your intellect to do it. Mad Bhaktaha. So the mind, his second point is, fix the mind in me. Be devoted to me. So have a devotion. The mind's enchanted by the world. So create in yourself a devotional feeling. Identify with something higher at all levels in your activities. Look at something more universal, that Atman, Brahman, self, whatever. In your emotion, create that devotion to something more universal. In your discrimination, enable your mind to be placed on something universal. So all your distinctions, your rationale, is made upon something universal. Is it real? Is it unreal? Is it a higher value or a lower value? Is it selfish, unselfish, selfless? You have these sorts of questionings going in your mind when you perform any activities or your feelings or your thinking. Next one. So bow down to me, sacrifice to me. To develop anything, one has got to be of service. And to serve means to sacrifice your own interest. And that's something very, very difficult because you're always thinking about, what can I get out of it? So dedicate all your actions towards something bigger. Not what I can get out of it. What can I put into it? There's got to be the attitude. Sacrifice, because initially it stretches you, it gives you a bit of friction. But once you understand what you're doing, it becomes smooth and you're most willing, most comfortable with that. And you're the one who grows. You get a universal perspective. You're able to, I can rather than I can't. Things run smooth for you when you serve. You don't look in your own interest. So bow down to me. Bow down to me. Surrender your ego. What is ego, anybody? What do we mean by ego? There's many ways you can define it, but you can throw a few things to shed light to me, at least. Tim?
It's the illusion that you are separate from others with a separate identity.
So you're separate. What else? If we work on that, what else does it mean? If you're separate than others, what does it mean? Poonam. You have to get off mute. Thank you. Anybody else while we're waiting for Poonam?
Sorry, I found the mute button. I was going to say, is it putting yourself above others? You think you're more important than others?
You can say that. So you make yourself all important.
More important than others.
More important than others.
Yeah,
Okay.
brother.
Jyoti?
Going back to Tim's point where he said, you're separate from others, but also separation, isn't that detachment? I know it's completely varying off a different thing, but isn't that detachment as well? So does ego come to play with detachment, is my question.
Okay. Well, it's actually not a bad question. It's a good question, in fact. So, it is a detachment, but it's negating others in the sense of making you all important, your little you all important. So your body, your mind, your intellect is more important than others, which actually segregates you and makes you alone rather than universal. So it makes you an individual rather than that self, that truth. Keeps you in the illusion. Makes you, I'm doing all the homework, I'm doing the work here. Makes you resistant. I tell you one thing, I did my homework in the morning, so I can do it. I don't know about what you like were doing. You're right, makes you resistant to your world. All should cater to you because you're important. Separate. Will the world cater to you? It can't cater to you all the time. So ego, I'm important, I alone exist. You all should look after me, never mind what happens to you. Separation, resistance, killer to anything of universality. Even if it's a benevolent ego, there's a parameter on there. You might be doing something noble and feel this is important. But it's important in that parameter and everything else doesn't count. Become devilish to everything else. My country, but anything outside of my country, I'm not interested. Those are all devilish things. So that's not universal. Okay, you include all the world of people. You love them. It doesn't include all creatures. As long as I can eat those creatures, it's okay. But my fellow men, I'm in harmony with. But I need something on my plate, which is a little creature. So that's still got an ego there. Still got a... So, ego. The whole of the spiritual pursuit is to dissolve your ego and to become that universal self. There can be no quarrel, no stress, no loneliness, no isolation, no worry, no anxiety, no frustration. It just can be unity. Eternal happiness. If you bother to put in the effort, that's the point. So he's putting here, how can we do this? Surrender your ego to the higher. Thine, everything you do, thine will be done, not mine. Don't make it personal. Just do what you've got to do. If you feel I've got a strong desire, I want this, do it, ablate it to something higher. Of course we have desires, just keep ablating it to something higher. So with these disciplines, at the physical, the mental, and the intellectual, dedicating your actions to a truth, even whatever your desires are, even if selfishness creeps in, slowly, slowly you up these disciplines, and slowly, slowly, even before you reach an enlightenment, you get a peace of mind, a clarity of intellect, a dynamism in your action, and you're effervescing with energy. And then you keep going, he's saying if you keep with these practices, you get to that spiritual enlightenment. You've got to keep going. Can't let that ego come in. That's a big topic. Ego and detachment. Perhaps this is a question for next week. We can have Jyoti a bit more clarity on it. We're just in context of the verse today, but we will take that. It's a good question. Let's read it. Is everybody okay before we go anywhere so far? Does anybody have any questions? Okay, go ahead, Jyoti.
Where does emotions come to play? Because you've got detachment, you've got ego, you've got your emotions. Are you saying the higher you go spiritually, the emotions all fizzle down?
No. The more you evolve spiritually, the more depth of emotion you will have, the more refined your emotions will be. What makes you human is your ability to feel, connect with others, that identification. But you won't be emotional that you're hysterical. It's all about me. Your emotions have a refinement in quality where you can feel for another without wanting something back out of it. You can feel for the country. You can act on it. You meet another person, you feel that they're yours. It's an identification. You don't feel that that's not my family. Every child becomes yours. So there's a grand feeling. You surrender your emotion to something higher. Everything universally becomes the same as you. So you have to emotions is a big topic. You have to, good, you're asking these questions. You have to actually refine your emotions. Otherwise, they'll play havoc with you because they come from the mind. They trip you up. If a society is just emotional, it trips you up. It's full of worry and anxiety, past and future. It's never in the present. You have to direct that with the intellect. But if you refine your emotions, there's a feeling of, it's not based on condition. There's a higher value of feeling. You see an animal, you see a cow or a goat, you can't eat them if you have emotion. You understand they're sentient because you identify with them. Whereas if you don't have any emotion towards them, you can easily eat them. There's no agitation. There's no agitation, but cause and effect will take place. The ignorance isn't the, ignorance has a cause and effect playing in it. And you might not initially feel irritated, but you create a sort of kind of character in yourself by doing certain things which are against the laws of nature. So emotions are key to your spiritual evolution. Directing the emotions to a more universal value is essential. Surrender your mind or need devotion, something higher. Emotion is without selfishness, true refinement. But the emotion we have today is all based on something. I'll do something for you, you do it for me, I like you, I love you. But if you stop doing that, I'm not going to love you. It's conditional. That's not real emotion. That's attachment. That's not love. It's attachment. So people confuse that for that love, that attachment for love. You're doing nice things for me, you love me. The minute you stop, you hate me. Let's go our separate ways. But true emotion is a refinement. Whoever you meet. So we can go into that as well. Another good question. Let's read the commentary. Thank you. Anybody else have any? Okay, let's go.
The concluding verse gives general directions to a seeker for reaching the final state of self-realization. Point number 1, Manmanaha, mind fixed on me. The mind rambles into the past and future. Your intellect must control and direct the mind to the thought of the self, or me, a discipline at the intellectual level. 2, Bhava Mad Bhaktaha, be devoted to me. The mind tends to indulge in the enchantments of the external world. Instead, develop the devotional feeling towards God, the Supreme Self, a discipline at the emotional level. Number 3, Madhyaji, sacrifice to me. Serve, sacrifice, dedicate your actions to the self. Oblate all actions to God, a discipline at the physical level. Number 4, Mam Namaskuru, bow down to me. Surrender your ego completely to the self. An attitude of thy will be done instead of my will be done. A discipline at the level of the ego.
Mm-hmm.
The above disciplines will help you unite your individual self with the Supreme Self. In the spiritual path, you must constantly maintain the self as your goal. Practice the disciplines only with the sole purpose of realizing the self. Continue the practices with this clear and firm goal in your mind. You will attain spiritual enlightenment.
Consistency of purpose in your practice at the physical, mental, intellectual levels. So here we conclude the chapter 9, verse knowledge or secret. So we'll chant the final last concluding verse, and then we will chant in the tradition to acknowledge that we've not completed our studies and it's ongoing in terms of our spiritual learning. We'll chant the first verse. So I will just chant the final verse. Om Tat Sat Iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita Upanishadsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Shri Krishna Arjuna Samaveda Raja Vidyaya Yoga Guhya Yogo Nama Namayodhyayaha. Let's read the translation, Tim, if you'd like to do that.
That is real. Thus, in the Upanishads of the glorious Bhagavad Gita, the science of the eternal, the scripture of yoga, the dialogue between Sri Krishna and Arjuna, ends the 9th chapter entitled The Yoga of Royal Knowledge and Royal Secret.
So if we If we'd all like to go to verse 1 of the chapter 9, we will have this.
Shri Bhagavanuvacha Idam Sute Guhyatamam Pravakshamyanasuyave Jnanam Vijnana Sahitam Yadhyatva Mokshase Shubhan.
So we come to the concluding verse and part of chapter 9. And we'll see you all next week for the next part of our learning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Hi,
you.
Donna. Welcome.